Started, so find your seat during that time. I'm Patrick Lewis, Director of Collections and Research here at the Filson Historical Society. Thank you for joining us for tonight's lecture. Filson. Thank you again for joining us both in person and virtually for Pretend the Ball is Named Jim Crow, Story of Josh Gibson. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to remind those of us joining in person to please silence your cell phones for the duration of the program. We will have a short Q&A session at the conclusion of the program. If you're joining us virtually, please drop your questions in the chat and we'll share them as time permits. If you're here in person, we've got mics on either side of the room. Please use those so that everybody's able to hear. I'm really excited tonight. As a UPK editorial board member, I saw this proposal come through, and as a baseball fan, was incredibly excited about it. I envisioned then this night, I knew it would be a perfect event for us to celebrate here at the Filson, so I'm really glad that we're able to all come together. Dorian Hairston is a poet, scholar, and former University of Kentucky baseball player from Lexington. He's a member of the Appalachian Poets, and his work has appeared in Shale, Anthology of Appalachian Writers, and Pluck. Thank you for joining us tonight. Please join me in welcoming Dorian.
See, Patrick, thank you for that lovely introduction. As he said, my name is Dorian Hairston, and I am going to be drinking a lot of water. I like to start out first with some shout outs. My mom, my dad, who he's here, my brother, who played at the University of Louisville, so we will forgive him. My lovely wife, my father-in-law, my aunt-in-law, and my kids are watching at home, and they should be going to bed here in about 25 minutes. And then also, I would like to give a shout out to one Phyllis Schlick, who is in the audience today. And we are actually matching. That was not on purpose. She was my high school, I say English teacher. She didn't actually have me in English class. It was all creative writing. And I needed to do an independent study my senior year of high school. And Frank X. Walker had just, actually, can you raise your hand really quickly so that everybody knows who you are? Yeah. Frank X. Walker had actually just completed or published Isaac Murphy, I Dedicate This Ride. And in it, that's a story about Isaac Murphy, a black jockey living in Lexington, Kentucky, through persona poetry. And she was like, okay, here's what you're going to do. You're going to write for your independent study a chapbook just like this, but for baseball. And I was like, okay, I'm going to pick Jackie Robinson, Branch Rickey, and Happy Chandler. And then I remember turning in the first few poems, and she was like, oh, she's really nice. She's a sweet lady. She's a sweet lady. But she said, no, I don't think this is it. I think you need to find somebody else. So I run down the library, and they find a book called The Power of the Darkness by Mark Rabowski. And it's a book about Josh Gibson. And I remember giving her the report, like, this is who Josh Gibson is, hit over 800 home runs in his career, et cetera, et cetera. And she said, I think you found it. And 10 years later, I turned it in to Patrick O'Dowd at the University of Kentucky Press, or the University Press of Kentucky, excuse me. And now it's in your hands. And if it isn't, afterwards, Carmichael's is selling a bunch of them. We're trying to sell out tonight. So thank you, Ms. Schlick, Phyllis, because I'm old now and I can use your first name. So before that, or before I get more into this, I'm gonna read a poem. It's the first poem in the book, and it is Manifesto for Black Baseball Players. And this is a little bit of a background for this one. It's written from the persona of this man right here, Josh Gibson. And I remember trying to figure out what I was going to title this collection. And Frank X. Walker in my MFA program said, this title that you're working, I don't even remember the title. This title you're working with, this is not it. We need to find something else. I turned this poem in, and he looked at this line, pretend the ball is named Jim Crow, and said, that is your title. So this poem, and I think I'm going to read two poems that are like this. It's written like a baseball game. So there's a top half and a bottom half of an inning. This poem actually has 9 couplets, so 9 innings, and the grays come out on top. Manifesto for Black baseball players. Persona, Josh Gibson. 1. Never forget the 42 reasons baseball is best played with color. 2. Steal bases like they stole this country. 3. Break into record books, turn more than just the ink black. 4. Pretend the ball is named Jim Crow. 5. Decolonize the Hall of Fame. 6. Remember we gave the game lights, helmets, and style. 7. Never be controlled by anything white. 8. Belt lift every voice and sing during their national anthem. 9. Find you a Helen, drop down on one knee, place a baseball field on her 4th finger. And feel free to let me know if you like it. And if you don't, just keep your opinion to yourself. But no, so I want to take this time to talk a little bit about who Josh Gibson was. So Josh Gibson was born in 1911 in Buena Vista, Georgia. He passes away in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1947, which is in January of 1947, which is significant because that is the year that Jackie Robinson breaks the color barrier. So the day after Tax Day, April 15th, everybody wears the number 42, and that's because of Jackie Robinson. So Josh Gibson passed away before ever actually seeing a Black man in a Major League Baseball uniform. And I try to speculate as to how he felt, how he would have felt about that. But I think the biggest tragedy in Josh's life is him losing his wife. So he gets married at about 17, 18 years old. His wife dies giving birth to a set of twins, who the story goes that 3 weeks later, they're named after their parents, Josh and Helen Gibson Jr. So I'm going to read a couple of poems, but before that, I'm going to talk about the idea or concept of writing these as persona poems. So for those who don't know, persona poetry is where the poet takes on the persona of somebody else. In this text, I take on the persona of Josh Gibson, Helen, and Josh Gibson Jr. Rebecca is not in this book. Helen Gibson, though, Senior is. Also, Hooks Tinker, who you'll see some pictures of him later. I'm going to close with some Hooks Tinker poems. You also see Satchel Paige. I'm going to read a Satchel poem. And I want to kind of try to humanize this myth of Josh Gibson. So he's the greatest power hitter to ever play the game, hit over 800 home runs in his career. But we need to remember that he is a man. So this next poem is the first poem from Helen's point of view. This is titled Naming, and I'm going to sneak a drink of water before I start this. Naming, Helen Gibson. Doc says there are 2 sets of feet trying to stretch themselves a little more room inside me, and they're running out of space. I feel they might be searching for another belly soon, the way they wrestle each other into a comfortable position. It's like all the secrets and promises Josh has blown into my ear have slid into my womb and grown themselves too big for what docs say is my too small frame. We both think he's wrong. Josh's favorite thing to do when he tried to catch some sleep is to place his callus-covered hands on my tummy and try to guess which part of the twins is on the other side of my stretched out, thin layer of skin. As he dozed off, he liked to tell them how he prays they come out looking as good as their mom. He even tries out a few names on them, then place his head close to listen for the twins' approval. We all let him play his game. When Josh gets to sleep and snores enough times, for them to feel confident he out for good. The twins whisper up in my ear exactly what they want to be called, and they make me promise to keep it a secret. Thank you. So one of the things that I'm also going to do like a hybrid craft talk as well. So one of the things that I struggled with in this text was, how do I tell the story of Josh and Helen Gibson Jr. entering the world without just telling my reader, like, here, this is what happened. I needed to write a poem. So this poem actually had, I think, like 17 different versions from a whole bunch of different voices, and I settled on Josh Jr. And this is one of the few times that he's a little bit more serious in what he's talking about, because he's got some other ones that are I think a little funny. So, night visions, Josh Jr. Aunties say they just nightmares, but they're the realest thing I ever seen. Papa is in some hospital room with walls darker than he is when he come home in the summer. I never can tell if the screams are me, my sister, or Papa, or Granny, or some ghost. The doctor hold us like little secrets, but Papa refused to even touch or look at his two little mirrors, like he disgusted at the image we spit back at him, or worse, the memory of all the dreams he used to have. He just stared at Mama, sleeping real peaceful, right exhausted. When the doctor try and hand us to Papa, an echo of, I don't want them, I want my wife, takes the knees right out from under Big Josh. That's when I wake up. And Auntie come in, say I've been screaming, wipes the sweat off my face, tells the lie, everything is all right. I told Auntie once about my nightmare and asked if it was as real as it feels. She'd tell me we got our names 3 whole weeks after we was born because it hurt Papa too much. Now, I always freeze the nightmare when we all in the room together and Mama just sleep. Helen and I ain't named yet, and Papa got his whole family back. So that's the so you've heard from Josh, you've heard from Helen Gibson, and you've also heard from Josh Gibson Jr. This is from Helen Gibson Jr. And this is a lot of these poems from Helen Gibson Jr. are actually her writing. So Josh writes some letters. I'm going to talk about those in a second. But Helen Gibson Jr. is writing in her diary. So, dear diary, when Papa say that he ain't got no or ain't big on religion, he only telling half the truth. See, I understand what he really mean is that he ain't one to get down on his bad knee or his good one, and most definitely not both, to pray or worship some God that he feel took or at least tried to take love away. He say Mama did though, believe that is. Says she could sing too. Maybe that'd be the music I hear when I get alone and ain't got nothing to keep me busy. One time he let slip that she could cook too. Something about some collards or cornbread, but he trailed off before I could ask. And one night, it was just me and him in the main room across from each other, and neither of us said a word. In that silence, I just really wanted to know what it was like, the first time he knew it was her. And I wish I could ask him about Mama, maybe not have to guess so much or hear from her side of the family. And it ain't that I don't believe them. It's just, I think you understand. Anyway, when Papa say he ain't got no belief, what he really mean is that would no one be able to make sense of that thing that he always chasing. And I know him well enough to see that he ain't just looking for Mama or running from pain or playing a game to mask some anger or drinking to escape what his life really is. And it might be all that, but on some nights when Junior over a friend's and it's just me, that song gets a little more clear, and I know it's Mama. And she's trying to tell me all that Papa can't. So if you can't tell, I like to write. So I think it's kind of meta that I chose to write so many letters inside of the text. And the ones that I'm most proud of are these letters that Josh writes to his wife, Helen. Now, this first one is the very first poem, or excuse me, the very first letter that he writes to his wife. It's not clear to the reader if Josh Gibson is actually sending these letters off, if they're actually going off, or is this just something that he's using to cope with this massive amount of grief? But anyway, he does write these letters, and this is home run number one. Dear Helen, I snuck this one into the bucket of game balls, sealed the envelope by stitching it closed with the bright red laces from your favorite shoes. Spent hours trying to squeeze each second of 2 years into 5¼ ounces of white leather wound tight around the core of a ball. This is my first letter, the first of many. Just one of these can't hold all this love. So I will pretend each ball can fly its way through the stars to you. I'll split each message up, ball after ball, home run after home run, till God get tired of all them broken windows up in heaven and bring me there too. Love, Josh. So one of the things to talk craft a little bit here is that Josh Gibson was a very powerful man. He could hit a ball. Let's see, Buck O'Neil described it as there's only 3 times that he's heard a bat sound that way. It was Bo Jackson, Babe Ruth, and Josh Gibson. So he was a different type of guy. And as I was thinking about how I'm going to tell this story, Josh definitely would have been trying to hit the ball as far as he possibly could. So I was like, man, heaven needs some broken windows. So this next poem, we're going to transition a little bit now that I've hopefully humanized these characters or made these folks real or relatable to you all. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the history. So as I'm trying to write this collection, or as I was trying to write this collection, I thought, how do I, because there aren't a whole lot of primary sources for the story of Josh Gibson. He dies in 1947. The Negro Leagues are not necessarily respected. We're not doing as much to preserve their history in the 40s as we are for Major League Baseball. So I wanted to use Josh as a way to talk about history in that time period. So talk about America in the 20s, 30s, and 40s through the lens of this man who was a widower, a father, a son, a lover of many, and also as a former baseball player, a really good baseball player. So when I was doing the research, I found out that in the Negro Leagues, when teams would barnstorm, they would not allow for the team to stay at certain hotels. And sometimes that meant that there were no hotel beds or rooms for folks to stay at. So a little bit about me at the University of Kentucky. I can't really sleep on buses or planes, but some of my teammates got the absolute best sleep of their life on those buses. I was like, I don't think Josh would want to sleep on a bus. I did some more research and found that they would actually go all the way to the park and they would sleep at the park in the grass. And at first I was like, man, that sounds tragic. And then I thought about it for a second. It's like, Josh wouldn't say that. This is what Josh would say, I think. It's called outfield cot. Persona Josh Gibson. Sometimes when we on the road and we need a place to stay and just hop on a bus full of everything we own and ride till we stumble across the nearest end. When we real lucky, the moon looked like a pearl before the first pitch and the stars light up just enough for Innkeeps to see all the black on our faces that they don't want to rub off on their pillowcases, then pretend to read some sheet that says they at capacity for the night. Around that time, we all bob our heads as if we understand what we mean and walk real proud to the bus to ride the few blocks down the street to the park. Once we there, We each find us a spot somewhere in the outfield grass, get real comfortable on our fresh cut cot, and all my teammates count sheep. I don't waste my time with that foolishness. I like to lay back, like to count the stars, see if I can't pick out the one I'm about to hit next. Shout out to my mom. That's one of her favorites. So this next poem, one of the things that I have a lot of obsessions, as poets tend to, and this one, you know, Josh. I have a poem here. I'm not going to read it tonight, but it's titled "Trash Talk." Josh is a little bit of a trash talker, and he's got a big head, rightly so. And I thought that, you know, who is it that exists besides Satchel Paige who can match Josh? I was like, it's got to be some of the deities or one deity. So this is Resurrection, and this is Josh Gibson. This is another baseball formatted poem. There are extra innings, and later on we can talk about why I chose to do extra innings on this poem and not the other one. But Resurrection. If Helen ever get another breath, ever rise up out the ground, I'll challenge God, pitcher versus hitter, my bat against his best stuff. I'll tell him no cheating this time, no doctoring balls, and no early deaths. Tell him his son can't umpire, nor none of his angels. This heavyweight bout is on my terms, and I doubt a single strike gets by me. But if he catch me on my heels, put me a pitch away from death, I'll shorten my stroke, stay alive until he makes a mistake. Then I'll hit that ball so fast, only thing he catch is whiplash. While he search all them stars he created for the one I just hit, I'll sprint round them bases, right on past home, hold Helen by the hand, find the twins, and introduce them to their mom. So this next one is another poem that has a little bit of a historical context that needs to be explained as I take another drink of water. So during this time, there's a big event that occurs in the United States of America. You all may know of it because this is the Filson Historical Society, so I'm assuming you know a little bit about American history, called the Great Depression. And one of the phrases that I learned, or that I heard one of my professors when I was an undergrad say, is that when America's got a cold, Black people got the flu. And that's how she described the Great Depression. So as I was doing this research, I found that during this time, there's also a man down in the Dominican Republic by the name of Rafael Leonidas Trujillo. And he has taken over, and it's important to note that he is of Haitian descent, but he's taken over the Dominican Republic, and he has nationalized the sugar and rum industries and uses that money to pay Negro League baseball players, as he's also committing, trigger warning, mass genocide against Haitians for being too Black, in his opinion. He pays Negro League baseball players to come down and play for his national team so that he can gain favor with the also Black Dominicans that he is dictator of, who aren't as Black in his opinion as the Haitians, but doesn't have an issue with it. Its history is complicated. So he pays. So during this time, there aren't contracts in the same way that there are for Major League Baseball, in the Negro Leagues. So guys would, for example, Satchel Paige is a perfect example of this. Satch would split the gate. So for a baseball game, there would be, let's say that, well, I don't know the numbers. We'll say you're pulling in $20,000 100 years ago, or $10,000 100 years ago at a baseball game. Satch is going to say, I want 50% of that, because half of those people there are there to see me. And he'd get it. Josh couldn't do that. But Josh also, so Leonidas Trujillo pays Satchel Paige. Then he tells Satchel Paige to go find some other guys to come with him to play on his team. Josh, the story is that Josh was the only one that asked permission, even though he really didn't need to, because his name is Josh Gibson. Now, while he's down there, or around this time, there's also, it's called the Perry Hill Massacre. This is where individuals would hold up parsley, and because of the language that Haitians speak is French Creole, so they can't roll their R's in the same way that Dominicans could. So then they would be killed on sight. So this poem is titled Perry Hill, and I'm trying to ask the question of which, hopefully the poem speaks for itself here. Trujillo done rolled out the red carpet for Negro Leaguers' first chance he'd get, which is something Roosevelt ain't never done or do before. He let us wear his name, a big Trujillo, across our chests, and pay us good money, fine liquor, fair weather, and more beautiful skirts than we can count. I never been one to speak that Dominican type Spanish, but seeing Trujillo and his money don't really mind, and seeing how Negro contracts don't get no gate, an opportunity to walk out, to leave behind that white mess them Americans worship so much, is like a psychic playing numbers. Rumor been that Gus don't like playing his or paying his players, but I ain't never had no problems with that. Only reason I took a trip down south is because Trujillo got them big bucks, sugar and rum type money, and baseball race free down there. But ain't that some type of nonsense? Trujillo liking Negroes more than Roosevelt. I'm gonna go on to the next one, and you'll hear some more of that shortly. So this next poem is one of the few poems from Satchel Paige in the collection. And Satchel Paige, for those who don't know, is what the Cy Young Award would be named after if it wasn't for segregation. Satchel Paige is without a doubt the best pitcher that has ever played the game of baseball, in my opinion, but in many others' opinion as well, if they agree with me and are right. And Josh Gibson is the greatest, power hitter or hitter to ever play the game. So this is there's a story I need to tell. So Roy Campanella, I believe I've got the name right. He comes up to the mound and he says, "What do you want me for?" And he's talking to Satch. Satch says, "Look, we got 2 outs. Josh is who I want to face." He's like, "But he's 3 batters away." I understand. We're gonna walk the bases loaded, and we're gonna face Josh, and I'm gonna strike him out. Not only am I gonna do that, and this poem has an epigraph. I'm not gonna throw smoke at your yoke. I'm gonna throw a pea at your knee. And that is what Satchel Paige said to Josh Gibson right before he struck him out. Because Satch was so bad, he could tell you what was happening, and you couldn't stop it. So this is Battle of the Greatest. Gibson, he been blessed 3 times. First, for coming out his mother's womb black as a storm. Second, for being able to hold all that thunder and lightning inside a bat. Third, of course, for getting to step into the box and face me. People say Satch versus Josh was like the battle of the Titans and the gods, like Shango versus a mopane tree or David versus Goliath. But in this story, the giant and David stood on a mound together, one stretching to the heavens while the other slung enough baseballs to intentionally walk the bases loaded for Josh and his dull, one-sided wooden axe to try and keep me from playing catch with Campy. I told Josh what was coming, aimed for the blackness of Campy's mitt, threw 3 balls past the storm, and watched them all disappear. Later that night, I let good old Joshua know his only problem was I'm too good. I did leave him with some advice. I suggested in the future, when he finds himself on his knees talking to his creator, he might want to ask for something to be done about that huge hole in his back. There's Satch and Josh. I'm not exactly sure if that was before or after that happened. But Josh did. I will say this: Josh did get Satch a couple of times. So I'm going to transition now to what I think actually is my favorite. Not what I think, what I know is my favorite voice in the text, and that is Hook's Tinker. So Hook's Tinker is credited with discovering Josh Gibson, and he's one of the folks that I started my initial research with, was because he passed away in the 2000s. So he was able to tell a lot of the stories about Josh. And when I think about him as a character, I think about him being this kind of almost omniscient, super wise individual that has a lot of insight, and not just Josh, but into race, America, and the way that those all come together on or on the skin of Josh, on the body of Josh. So this one does come with a trigger warning. There's going to be some pretty harsh language. There's also something you should know. During this time, or back in the day, I'll say it that way. There was a game. I don't know that you can call it a game. That was the Milton Bradley purchased a company that produced it. It was called the Jolly Darky Target Game. I did not include the picture in the slides, but at the fair there was an actual advertisement. I'm going to read it. Quote: "It would say, hit a nigger, win a cigar." And if you hit the person, the black person, in the head with a baseball, you actually won a cigar. So I decided to write this poem called The Original Dodgers, because Jackie Robinson played for the Dodgers. Persona: Hook's Tinker. The traveling circus advertises, hit a nigger and win a cigar. To them, it's innocent hopscotch, it's skipping rope, it's a good coon hunt. Milton Bradley calls it the Jolly Darky Target Game, a wide hole with no teeth outlined by crimson swollen lips means the player must pretend a black man's head pokes through the open hole, becomes a tar-covered tongue, a bullseye. His body festers on a stool as balls try to split open forehead. Jackie Robinson was never the first Black Dodger. We done dodged balls for centuries, rent, lynch mobs, overseers, slave catchers, waded through fixed elections and rivers, then outrun horses and bloodhounds, even dodged some bullets a few times. But here soon, we might just turn ourselves into Josh Gibson, and America will find us in a 2-0 count, standing with a straight spine inside the batter's box, towering over the plate, waiting for their next pitch, waiting for their next mistake, and we guarantee it won't come back. Okay, so water number 2, hold on. So this next poem is going to be about the integration of baseball. So one of the things that I found was that I was always taught that during the integration, we let Jackie Robinson play. We as a country, we as a society, let Jackie Robinson play for the Dodgers because it was the right thing to do, that there was some form of altruism that existed, for which was the driving force for everything that happened with integration. And any real student of history understands that is not true. So this next one is Hook's Tinker reflecting on how we integrated, because during that time we were also having conversations about we should bring entire teams into Major League Baseball, entire Negro League baseball teams, because in 1946, Effa Manley and Abe Manley up in Newark, New York, owned the Newark Eagles, for which I played a season of summer ball with, but they were the Newark Pilots by that point. And they won the Negro League National, or the Negro League World Series, with 5, I think, Hall of Famers. And the now Guardians, previously Cleveland Indians, can thank them for just about every World Series they've ever won. But this is Seen It Coming, and this is another one of those baseball poems that's gone into extra innings. Seen It Coming, 1951. This is the only poem in which I specify what year I'm talking about. When they came over to our fields in a Model T shaped like Spanish ships, dressed in a European suits, fat fingers gripping Cuban cigars, they lowered their anchors and tied their boats to docks of Negro League ballparks just long enough to marvel at all they future profit draped in baseball uniforms. They planted their feet on African-built shores, pulled out they stopwatches, pens, and jotters to measure the dollar signs they branded on each black muscle. This, how they searched for who would help them raise they new pennants for cheap or free. They picked out their favorites, plucked at bedrock until whole nations crumbled, watched their walls Jericho, raided all our resources, gave birth to the devil, then ripped off our eyelids to make sure we couldn't look away. So another thing I try to explore in this collection is what is, and this is something that I do all the time. I'm on the local teachers board or the teachers union board in Fayette County for FCEA, which also supports your public schools any and everywhere at every opportunity you get. I am a public school teacher, so is my mother. But I find myself asking the question all the time, what is progress? And how do we define it? And what is sufficient progress? So Hooks Tinker, I think, is a perfect example of somebody who has a really clear idea of what progress is, and when you aren't doing enough, I think very much of like a Martin Luther King Jr.'s "Why We Can't Wait." He's someone who will tell you you're not thinking about this correctly. Your enough ain't enough. Hooks Tinker. If you ever been confused about how humans can be bought and sold like stock, or how they can be bred like horses, branded like cattle, whipped like beasts, if you can't see how one can chain another human being on their back to a stranger in the soot-black pit of slave ships where the ocean's salty spit fights a war with piss on skin, if you don't understand how one can be made to pick cotton, harvest rice, hang tobacco, or people for free, lay down rails, pave roads, build countries, make wealth for free, be wealth. If this seemed foreign to you, ain't no way you can see an American Negro soldier like Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier is nowhere near enough progress. I'm gonna have to put my mom in the front row every time because she's up here gassing me up. I'm gonna ask the audience a question. Does anybody know where the Hall of Fame is? Anybody in the audience know where the Hall of Fame is located for Major League Baseball? Cooperstown, perfect. That is actually the name of this next poem. Also from Hooks Tinker, and I think this one is. I always try to sign my books. Well, whenever I sign a book, which the shameless plug, we have some over here off to the side. You can purchase some after I'm finished up here. I try to write play ball, and I mean that in more ways than one. I believe very seriously that like we are here for a very limited amount of time, and we should be playing a lot of baseball and a lot of other stuff too. And I think Hooks Tinker here has some really valuable insights into what we should be trying to do with our lives. Cooperstown. Everything about baseball white, but it's the Negro that make it a game. I've seen more out our version of play in a single 9 innings than a whole season of theirs. Baseball in this country already missed their chance to make all this mess right. They should have never been afraid of their mediocrity, never feared being shown up. If there's one example sufficient to knock out all their nonsense about their superiority, it's the time Josh flattened a fastball from they league so-called MVP Dizzy Dean. Josh hit that ball so hard, Dean took himself out the game. True story. This is how we know every record they hold before integration is a lie. Now, it does feel good to see Josh's face mixed in with all them greats, bronze profiles, making them seem immortal to all the living. But what I want to see, what Josh would have loved, is when you hang up our portraits, salute our genius and power, all our finesse and flair, praise every drop of beauty. Let all your fear go. Then, and only then, do I give you the right, permission to say, play ball. Let's see. How am I doing on time? Do I have two more or one more? So I'm gonna actually, because this was a maybe, but I haven't read this one in public yet, and Miss Schlick's in the audience. Phyllis is in the audience, so I'm gonna read a whole bunch. So this next one is also from the persona of Hooks Tinker, and this one is after that Langston Hughes poem titled Harlem, and it's a mirror poem, is what we call it, and it's an exercise I do sometimes when I teach creative writing, and it's one that was done for me when I was a student, where you take a poem and you try to make yours look as similar. The way it's described is you can get as close to the mirror or as far away as you would like. Another practice is called defamiliarization. But this one is Brooklyn, and it looks just like Langston Hughes's, but his is, I think, a little bit better. Brooklyn. What happens to a dream assimilated? Does it splinter like a broken bat from a fastball on the hands? Or blister like palms after too many swings? Or rip like a tattered glove forgotten in the elements? Does it reek like molded cleats inside rejected locker rooms? Or is it colonized by weeds like abandoned fields? Maybe it's just heavy like a waterlogged ball, or the number 42 stitched on every jersey each April 15th. Or does it erode? Um, I need to drink a lot of water for this one. So this last one is actually the only poem in the collection that is not from someone else's point of view. It's the one that's from Dorian Hairston's, and it's titled "The Walk Off." And I don't think I need to introduce it anymore. Just know that you'll hear another shout out to Miss Phyllis. I'll say it that way. Get up, Josh. You ain't no Lazarus. You don't need Jesus, no God. You just you. Here's a bat. Get up, get up, get up, Josh. I brought you a glove. Let's play catch. I ain't much on pitching, but we can hit if you just get up. They let us play now. You hear? They let us play. And they say you was the greatest. You hear the greatest there ever was. And I just want to see. Can I see? Can you get up? It's me. I'm just a fan. My name's Dorian. I got power, but not like you. And I read about you once. My high school librarian found the only book in the whole school that mentioned your name. And my English teacher told me to write about you. And I brought some poems for you. If you want to listen, that's cool. But I just want to play. Can we play? I know it's weird me standing over your grave and such, but I think it's weird you're pretending to sleep. So please just get up. Let us play now. They even said sorry, I let you in the Hall of Fame, gave you your record that I know you already had. Maybe one day name the award after you, but they say it's better now. They ain't lynching us no more. They don't kill us as much. And we can work for them for more money now. And it's cool. And we don't rewrote the record books. And we didn't even have you. But you got to get up to see. You got to get up. Get up, Josh. I'm putting together a team. You were my first pick. But you got to get up, please. I know you ain't Lazarus and Jesus ain't done much for us. So I figured I just ask you straight. Get up. I even got you a uniform if you just rise up. I want to see. I want to see what they kept me from. I want to see what they were so afraid of. Get up, Josh. Get up. You can't die. Please. Just get up. Thank you. Thank you.
If anybody has questions, please, we've got mics over on either side of the room. We'd love to make this an interactive conversation.
Yes, please. Questions. Don't save them for when I'm signing books, but you are going to buy some books and I will sign.
I'll show my ignorance a little bit about baseball, but probably. Was there competition between some white leagues and black leagues?
Yeah, so that was called barnstorming. So what would happen is they would play each other just unofficially, and Dizzy Dean would actually put together a team, and he would play Negro League teams, because for a lot of the players, anybody that's ever played baseball knows that, like, you want to be the best, and in order to know that you're the best, you got to play the best. So for a lot of the players, Mickey Mantle's a good example of this. Yeah. They knew where the talent was, and they wanted to play who was the best because they wanted to say they beat the best.
Yeah.
So Dizzy Dean was actually pitching in a barnstorming game. Pitched, I think gave up a home run to Josh, and then Josh almost took his head off on a double. And as Josh is rounding first, Dean is walking to right field, told the right fielder to get in the dugout and told somebody else to go pitch. And then after the game, he told Josh and Satch that, hey, man, if we had you, we would win the pennant by July and just go fishing the rest of the season.
That's right.
So, yeah. Any others?
I'm probably the only one in here who actually saw Satchel Paige pitch when he was with the St. Louis Browns.
I'm jealous.
But my question is, if you hadn't played baseball, what would you have written about?
Yeah, that is a great question. If I hadn't played baseball, my first book would probably be, I probably would have never grown out of my love poems stage. I mean, I still write love poems. They're just a baseball. But I would probably be writing a bunch of mediocre love poems that hopefully my wife loves.
As you've been talking and reading your poems, we've been looking at these pictures that have been rotating on the screen behind you. Can you talk about the size and the weight of these athletes?
So Josh was about, and I'm a little rusty on it, about 6'2", little over 200 pounds. But so there's a couple of poems in here early on that talk about kind of how he grows up. So he trains to be an electrician while he's in Buena Vista, Georgia. Comes up to Pittsburgh. He drops out, or he stops going to school. I don't know that it's fair to necessarily say drop out. He starts working at the steel mill. So here's this boy that's moving, for Andrew Carnegie, a lot of steel. So like I imagine that like some of that seeps into his frame. So I mean, he is a solid rock. And that's how he's able to hit the ball just so far, because the other thing that people describe about his swing is that there wasn't a lot of what we call a load. He just kind of sat there and then just went, and there was just so much power behind that bat. And these guys are all for example, the guy who owns the Pittsburgh Crawfords, Cumberland Posey, not only was he a really good baseball player, and not only did he own the Pittsburgh Crawfords, the Homestead Grays. I get them mixed up. He was a world-class basketball player. So a lot of these guys are playing multiple sports, and they're good, better than most at all of them. And that's why they can play the dozens so well, because they know that they're the greatest.
My question has to do with your writing and how you expressed the emotions of these men. Was that your own imagination, or did you read a lot about them or watch a lot of documentaries about them where they express ideas or feelings like you have?
So a lot of that is just me. I didn't want to. There's this fine line for persona poetry that I didn't want to cross. I didn't want to say that this is this person. I want to make sure that the reader understands that this is me stepping into this person's point of view. And with anybody that knows me, I carry a lot of emotions. So all of that is, I hope, which it sounds like you were saying, comes through on the page, and that's what I want my reader to
Well, it
to walk
definitely
away
came
with.
through. It's very good. I have a second question if there's nobody else, and that is, I don't know much about who owned the Negro Leagues. Were they African Americans or were they somebody else?
And that's a great question, and that is what I hope to be my second collection of poetry. I mentioned, I think it was Gus in one of these poems. So Gus Greenlee owns the Pittsburgh Crawfords. I've got it straight now. Gus Greenlee owns the Pittsburgh Crawfords. He is not married. He is likely running numbers to finance his restaurant, Crawford Grill, Gus's Grill. He's got a bus that he runs a team around in. And that's how he's also financing the NAACP in Pittsburgh with this money. He's also trying to organize the Negro Leagues into their own actual league. In the same city is Cumberland Posey, who owns a boat business. He's shipping steel for Andrew Carnegie up and down the river. And he co-owns the team. I don't know that it's on paper, but we all know his wife was running the show. And then up in Newark, New York, Effa Manley co-owns the Newark Eagles with her husband, Abe Manley. And they when they first owned the team, Josh Gibson's Grays, or I can't remember which team he was with at that point in time. They come up and they hit so many home runs. Effa Manley reports that like in the third inning, she just went and got some bourbon. She's got some whiskey. Because she could not watch. And she said, we are going to make it a point. And 10 years later, they won the World Series for the Negro League. So these are the folks that own the teams, and they're very much involved in the Black community, which is one of the downsides of integration, is that you pull all those resources away from those communities and you destabilize entire groups of institutions, not just the individual one that you're attacking. So I'm hoping to explore that, and hopefully I pre-sold some copies whenever that gets published.
Well, we did get one question in from the chat from a virtual viewer, and it really tied in with that question about emotion. And Judith from the Zoom says that your emotion and performance really comes through. So you talked a little bit about the emotion that you pour into the words themselves, but how does it feel to give voice to these people that have lived in your head?
It feels like, the way I describe it, I love doing events like this because if you can't tell, I love the spotlight. So one of my favorite memories is my first home run in the SEC was at Alex Box Stadium down at LSU when they were #1 in the nation. And we actually ended up winning the series. And my first home run was on Sunday to win the rubber match. It wasn't a walk-off because we were the away team and I hit it in like the third or fourth inning. But still, it meant that we could beat Alex Bregman's, the World Series winner, the LSU Tigers. There was 15,000 people, and I absolutely loved it. And when I hit that home run, it's the same feeling when I get to read these poems in front of an audience, and they receive it well, because that doesn't always happen. So yeah, it's a real joy to get to share these words, and then to hopefully get people to leave here and have conversations surrounding the text and find ways to institute that real progress that we need to see in order to make the world better for my son and daughter who should be in bed by now.
Well, and speaking of little ones, thank you again for your service to Fayette County and the public school system.
Thank you.
Right. I just want to maybe bring it around to the students real quick. Have you used any of these in the classroom, and what's the reaction?
I am now at an elementary school as a behavior coach. So in this current role that I serve my community in, I do not get as many opportunities, but as an English teacher, I was actually teaching creative writing, and I would use a lot of these. I can go ahead and say this. I was using my writing time in class to also work on this book project, Two Birds, One Stone. So I would tell my students, hey, I'm working on a book. You're going to work on it with me. This is what we're writing. And I have used, some of these exercises to get students to start thinking about what are some of the things that I want to produce? What are some of the things that I want to share with some potential readers?
Well, that's incredible, and I'm really glad that you gave us a little bit of insight into the craft and the process tonight. That was some of my favorite part. Well, we'll close up tonight with one more round of applause for Dorian Hairston.